Welcome, Linda. Can you tell me a little bit about your company?
Hi, Dustin. Thanks for having me today. Yes, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Persista Bio. And Persista Bio is a early stage company working in the cell therapy space. So cell therapies are the new way of treating diseases. And maybe people have heard of the famous CAR T therapies for cancer. But we're working on a type of cell therapy that stays in your body long term and treats diseases that are chronic diseases. And we are in particular starting with treating type 1 diabetes.
What led you to go after type 1 diabetes as your first indication?
I was at a company called Giener Incorporated working in electrochemical technologies. And in electrochemistry, you can make oxygen, you can make hydrogen, you can detect things electrochemically with sensors. And for a long time, I was working on providing oxygen to cells and to organs. And we started out working with the pancreas. And we considered starting a business transporting the pancreas around with extra oxygen to keep it healthy when you're going to do a transplant for someone. But we decided to switch gears and we decided instead to work on cell therapies. Now we're all most familiar with the type 1 diabetes cells that are called pancreatic islets that secrete insulin.
How does it feel to be a co-founder? Is this something that you always saw yourself doing? Did you always have that entrepreneurial spirit, or is this something that you fell into?
I would say I spent many years at Giener Inc. in the R&D field, mostly patenting things, a little bit like in the academia field, writing research grants. And then our output in industry was mostly to patent. So it's a little different than being in academia where everybody wants to publish things. But then I got to the point where I collected patents at my company. I kept getting research grants, but the research grant would end and the product and the technology still wouldn't be a product. So I became interested back in 2016 of doing more product commercialization, product development, and less fundamental R&D to come up with the first idea. Working on product development is new for me instead of just advanced technology development. Do you see that there's like kind of a subtle difference there?
What differentiating factors are there with your company versus some of your competitors? How do you stand out?
Yes, so in the cell therapy for type 1 diabetes space, there's quite a few major companies that are working on stem cells that you can put in the body to treat the diabetes. There's fewer companies working on ways to put the cells in the body so they're protected and they last a long time. And so we're in that space. We're in the device side of a combination product. A combination product is a combination of a device and a cell, or a device and a drug. But here it's a device and a cell. So what's different is that we're in the smaller group of people working on devices to protect the cells and support the cells. And then really our device, our system that we're planning, one of the main things that's different is we're oxygenating the cells. So if you take the cells and you protect them from the blood vessels so the body doesn't reject them, what happens is the rate limiting nutrient becomes oxygenation. And that's especially true for these cells that are putting out a lot of insulin. They're a very productive cell. They're a very hungry cell type. So most of the nutrients from your body can cross the membrane and supply nutrients to the cells, glucose in, insulin out. But it turns out oxygen is the rate limiting step. And we're one of the very few people in the field that's got an advanced implantable oxygen generator.
In this merge between the cell therapy and the actual devices themselves. So can you dive a little bit deeper into the science behind that? And how does that affect patient outcomes?
Yes, the companies that are working on stem cells, there's been some really great advancements. It was first in academia, then academia spun out companies, then large pharma companies acquired those companies. So it's been a very exciting field to be able to make as many cells as you want. They're probably not done. Those cell lines aren't all GMP ready for human use yet. So there's still work to do there. The companies that have been making the stem cells, some of them had shareholders and wanted to prove their cells were working. So they would implant the cells in the body and give the patient immune suppression. So they weren't really getting an implant. They were getting a transplant, as if you were getting a whole organ like a lung or a heart. Most type 1 diabetics can't take immunosuppression drugs for life. You don't give a 10-year-old boy newly diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, you don't give them immune suppression for life. So we want to make a device that protects the cells so that the cells can live in the body and give the people the benefits of having just like a mini pancreas in their body. They won't have to do anything, Dustin, except charge our device probably once a week. So that's the difference, is we want to bring cell therapies to everyone without immune suppression and treat a large percentage of the 2 million type 1 diabetics in the US. They would just eat what they wanted to eat. They would exercise the way they wanted to exercise. They should do a good job, right? They should do healthy things just like you and I should, but they're not going to be commanded to do that by their diabetes. If they want to eat a piece of birthday cake, the implant is going to take care of that sugar surge and control it so they don't have the long-term side effects of type 1 diabetics.
I think one of the things that you're addressing that might not be obvious is a huge issue with compliance when it comes to diabetes. And so with a device that is this simple that you just have to charge once a week, are you seeing in the early trials that you're having a higher level of compliance versus other medication-based?
So, Dustin, we're still in preclinical animal studies, but what I have seen is there's been a number of people that have had islet transplants. And so that's the same kind of general idea. You take the islets from a cadaveric pancreas, you put them in the body, and that's been done for about 15 years now. So patients that have had that, they do have to have immune suppression, so they had to be very sick with type 1 diabetes in order to get into the trial or to get the procedure done. But those people are just impressed that they don't have to do anything. It really changes their life because they were very ill. They were passing out, going to the emergency room, etc. So this has been a big change for them. So that's what islet transplants, what patients were saying about those. And then there is a major pharma company with a stem cell islet. It's Vertex, based in Boston. And there was a Washington Post article about a woman that was in that clinical study. She had to take immune suppression because they just put the cells in naked without encapsulation. And she was just saying how life-changing it was to no longer have that daily maintenance. So it's not just compliance. It's no matter how well they control their diabetes, how careful they are about eating and exercising, there's still problems that crop up. I've known type 1 diabetics that were 70-something years old, and they did the best in class every decade along their life, and they still had problems with wound healing, eye problems, neuropathy in the feet, etc. You have to think long term here. That's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to change the lifestyle of type 1 diabetics and change their quality of life.
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? So you're not just building a treatment, you're actually changing their lifestyle and you're improving their entire quality of life. That's beyond even just a treatment.
And type 1 diabetics are waiting. The patients are waiting, Dustin. Many organizations keep saying to them, there's going to be a cure, there's going to be a cure. It's always 5 or 10 years away. We just haven't gotten there yet. And we think that there's multiple products that may come out that are cell therapies from these major pharmaceutical companies, but we think our encapsulation solution could work with one of those cell types to get an early product out. There are other things that people are working on, genetically modified cells. Breakthrough T1D is one of our sponsors, the foundation, and they're working on things to stop diabetes as soon as it's diagnosed, stop it in its tracks before you lose insulin production. So there's a lot of things people are trying, but we think this product could be an early product for patients on the market now.
You're addressing type 1 diabetes specifically. What's the percentage of children versus adolescents versus adults versus elderly that have type 1 diabetes, and how are you addressing that?
The foundation, Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, they changed their name recently to Breakthrough T1D because there's many people that first develop diabetes, type 1 diabetes, in their adulthood. So there's a range of when people become type 1 diabetic, from children to 20s to 30s and beyond. The lifespan is usually not very much shortened, so there's a whole population of people of all age ranges. So I would envision that cell implants with our device technology and other people's cells, I would say people, maybe mature people that are adults maybe would decide to have a cell implant. We don't know how long these are going to last, and maybe you would have to replace it after that. But 10 years of constantly good glucose control would really make a difference in the long-term complications of diabetes.
Yeah, that's better than multiple injections a day and having to track your glucose levels and insulin levels. Much easier and much better lifestyle for the patients.
And we think people are going to accept this because people are accepting cell and gene therapies. People accept implants like neurostimulators, vagus nerve stimulators. Obviously, people have different cardiac implants. So those things can be done and people are accepting them. Right now, I was surprised to learn that 70% of type 1 diabetics are using an advanced therapy. They're either using an implantable or surface glucose sensor or an insulin pump. People of all ages have adopted those technologies. Those give better glucose control, but they don't give ideal glucose control like an islet transplant does and how we hope these cell therapies would. So this is a very exciting field. We think we have a portion of the solution, and we think there's going to be a number of products come out in this area.
We've all heard the saying that people don't invest in companies, they invest in people. So tell me a little bit more about yourself. What drives you? What motivates you?
I am really interested in seeing technologies come to market. The first technology I commercialized, I was at Gainer Inc., and in 2010, we became the OEM manufacturer of a transdermal alcohol sensor that I was one of the inventors on. That's used now in parole and probation. It's a commercial product. Gainer is supplying the inner components, and there's a company in the parole probation space that's making that product. So I like the idea of things going to market, things getting to people to help them. I get so many emails and calls asking if that device could be sold or given to someone who's just an alcoholic or someone who's having a problem with a family member that needs help. That I really feel called to get to the level of the patient. I don't want to just file patents, right? I want to see things get commercialized and available for patients. So that's a little bit of part of my motivation. I am enjoying the process of applying for grants, applying for research funding. One other time I started up a company and we grew to 8 people with a lot of outsourcing, and that's where we developed the implantable oxygen generator. And now we're starting a company to combine the oxygen generator and the empty cell capsule and bring that together. So we're working right now to raise money to go into large animal studies and prove the concept.
So as a woman in biotech and a female entrepreneur, what hurdles have you run into? What setbacks have you seen? And has it been more difficult being a female entrepreneur?
Dustin, right now it's a very hard time for startup companies and fundraising. So I don't feel like there's a particular difficulty. It's just difficult for everyone right now. I'm a chemical engineer by training, and I've worked at an engineering firm for 20 plus years. So I'm just used to working amongst predominantly male engineers. So I don't think I'm seeing a disadvantage right now, but I've also haven't got my seed funding yet. So we're working on it.
That's great to hear, though. Hopefully that's the direction that we're going and we can see that equality. Last question that I have for you, any advice that you have to young entrepreneurs that are looking to get into industry, maybe start their own companies? What advice would you have for them?
I would recommend they try to do internships. So through their universities. I have a summer intern right now through Cornell who's a mechanical engineer and also a business minor. And you got to just dive in and do these things. So it's definitely, you really have to dive in and meet people and do things. You can spend too much time thinking about things, not wanting to take a chance at talking to somebody because your story isn't ready yet. You need your story to be ready, but your story is going to emerge. So you got to get out there and talk to people and meet people, collaborate with people, partner with people. So I think you got to dive in. That would be my advice.